Good afternoon. My name is Yvan Baker. I'm the Member of Parliament for Etobicoke Centre, and it's an honour to be here with our Prime Minister and our Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Alexandra Hitchi, the President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We are gathered on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Just over 31 years ago, Ukraine declared its independence, and I was with my grandfather Yvan that day. My grandparents lived in Ukraine during the Soviet regime, and my grandfather, like millions of his generation, like millions of prior generations, risked everything for a free and independent Ukraine. So you can imagine when Ukraine declared its independence on that day in 1991, this might have been the proudest day of his life. But he also said to me that day something I'll never forget. He said, now that Ukraine is independent, we need to continue the fight for Ukraine's independence. I was 14 years old at the time, and I remember saying to him, Guido, what are you talking about? The Ukrainian government has declared independence, the people want it, the international community supportive, it's over, you've won. I said, you are wrong. And of course I was wrong. In 2014, Russia twice invaded Ukraine, and a year ago to this day, Russia began its further full-scale invasion of Ukraine. When I speak to people in the community, when I speak to Canadians about the war, first and foremost what I hear about is the horror, the hundreds of thousands of victims, the bombs raining down on apartment buildings, on hospitals, on kindergartens, women and children being killed, tortured, and raped by Russian soldiers. But I also hear stories of great courage, of people of all ages, even the elderly, picking up weapons to defend their homeland in Ukraine, or Ukrainians leaving their professions and leaving their families to go fight, or outmanned and outgunned, holding the line against a much larger military, even if it means certain death. But there's one other thing I hear from Canadians, and that I sincerely believe, is that this war is not just about Ukraine, it's about all of us. That Ukrainians are not just fighting for their security, they're fighting for global security, and they're fighting for Canada's security. So as we mark this anniversary, I hope that we take the opportunity to mourn the victims, that we honor the courage of the Ukrainian people, and that we redouble our efforts to ensure that history does not repeat itself again, that we are not back here a year from now marking a second anniversary, so that we do everything possible to ensure that the Ukrainian people win and that we all win. Canada's support for Ukraine has been unwavering, and our Prime Minister has been leading us in that. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Prime Minister, for your leadership in that. I think Canadians can be incredibly proud of the contribution that Canada has made, the role that Canada has played in supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people and supporting security and democracy around the world. A big part of the support that Canada has provided has been military assistance. And of course, the person leading that work has been our Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand. And so I want to thank you, Minister, for your relentless work to make sure we provide Ukraine with the military support that it needs. And with that, I'd like to invite our Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand, to say a few words.
Merci beaucoup, Yvan. Good afternoon. It has been 1 year since Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale and illegal invasion of Ukraine. Flattened towns, bullet-riddled hospitals, mass graves, thousands of children torn apart from their families forever. Tout cela au nom du fantasme impérialiste d'un dictateur brutal. When Putin ordered his tanks across the Ukrainian border, he thought the world would stand by. He thought Kyiv would fall. He thought Ukrainians would freeze in the dark. He thought NATO would fracture. He thought Ukraine would surrender. He was wrong. For every bomb, missile, and mercenary Vladimir Putin has dropped down, we have seen the Ukrainian spirit rise up. Ukraine's military has retaken thousands of square kilometers of territory, from Kharkiv to Kherson to Kiev. Un an après le début de la guerre de Poutine, le monde voit que le cœur des Ukrainiens est fort, que leur détermination est résolue et que l'Ukraine ne sera pas vaincue. Canada has stood with Ukraine from the very beginning. And by that I mean since 2015, the Canadian Armed Forces have trained over 35,000 members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The Canadian Armed Forces have also transported more than £7 million of aid on behalf of our allies. And we have also provided more than $1 billion of military aid, from tanks to armored vehicles, air defense capabilities, artillery, and more. I was in Kyiv last year, weeks before the full-scale further invasion. What I saw there was remarkable. Children, parents, teachers, doctors, nurses, all standing resolute. And then when I was back in Kyiv and Irpin last month, I witnessed again their unshakable courage. And the bottom line is that Ukrainians are fighting valiantly for their homeland, for their sovereignty, and for their territorial integrity. But they are also fighting for us, because they are fighting for democracy itself. So to our Ukrainian friends and partners, I say this: you can trust that Canada stands shoulder to shoulder with you in the short and the long term. Le Canada sera là aussi longtemps qu'il le faudra, so that Ukraine can declare victory. Slava Ukraini. I would now like to ask the Prime Minister to take the podium. Thank you. Merci.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon. Merci Anita pour votre allocution et surtout pour tout le travail que vous faites pour soutenir l'Ukraine. Je suis très heureux aujourd'hui d'être en compagnie d'Yvan Baker, qui est un grand défenseur de l'Ukraine et une voix forte pour les valeurs canadiennes dans notre Parlement. Merci Yvan pour tout ce que tu fais. I'm honored as well to be here with the Canadian Armed Forces service members at the Fort York Armory. The motto of one of the units here is mindful of our ancient valor. Today, we are also mindful of Ukraine's enduring valor. But before I begin, I do want to address the humanitarian crisis in Turkey and Syria. Powerful quakes have killed tens of thousands, destroyed hundreds of thousands of homes, and displaced millions of people. Canadians have been heartbroken by the images they've seen, and they want to help. So today, we announced that Canada will match $10 million in donations raised by the Humanitarian Coalition and its members. This is in addition to our commitment to match donations to the Canadian Red Cross Earthquake in Turkey and Syria appeal. Nous annonçons aussi que nous allons verser 20 millions de dollars de plus en aide humanitaire directe en réponse à l'appel des Nations Unies pour la Turquie et la Syrie. En tout, le Canada s'est engagé à verser 50 millions de dollars à la suite du tremblement de terre pour aider à offrir une aide vitale aux gens touchés sous la forme d'eau, de couverture et de services de santé. Le Canada restera solidaire avec ces gens qui souffrent tant. That earthquake was a reminder that there are tragedies that cannot be prevented, natural disasters that take lives and cause inescapable devastation. But there are also entirely senseless but avoidable tragedies born of evil, like what the world has witnessed in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, and their fellow citizens are dying every day, not because of an act of God, but because of the cowardly acts of one man, Vladimir Putin, and his enablers. A year ago, Putin invaded a sovereign, democratic country. He was driven by greed, by cruelty. He was under the illusion that he could overtake Ukraine in a matter of days. Well, 365 days later, Ukraine is still standing strong. 365 days and counting. Il y a un an maintenant, le Kremlin a commencé à lancer des attaques brutales qui ont tué des civils et pris pour cible des maisons, des hôpitaux. Les intimidateurs, comme le président Poutine, ne comprendront jamais que la peur est une arme impuissante contre ceux qui se battent pour leur liberté. À répétition, la défense ukrainienne a résisté à l'agression russe. But we know that this fight is not over. Today, Canada is announcing new military support for our friends in Ukraine. We will deliver 4 additional Leopard-2 tanks to the armed forces of Ukraine and an armored recovery vehicle. This is in addition to the 4 Leopard tanks already in the region, which CAF members are right now training Ukrainian tank members to use. We're also delivering 5,000 rounds of ammunition, which will help the armed forces of Ukraine continue to defend their freedom and fight for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Another critical part of our support is to impose further costs on Russia for its illegal and unjustifiable actions. We are announcing new sanctions on 129 individuals and 63 entities, including Russian deputy prime ministers, ministers, other members of the Office of the President of Russia, members of the Russian military, and those involved in the production of artillery and weapons used in Ukraine. We're also banning certain chemicals used in the manufacture of electronics from being exported to Russia. Et nous luttons contre les pratiques commerciales trompeuses que la Russie et le Bélarus emploient pour fausser les prix et s'attaquer aux producteurs canadiens. Depuis le début, ces deux pays mentent au sujet de l'invasion et ils mentent au sujet de la valeur de leurs marchandises. En réponse à cela, nous donnons à l'Agence des services frontaliers du Canada de nouveaux outils pour protéger l'intégrité de nos marchés et surtout protéger les producteurs canadiens contre ces interventions malhonnêtes. Le Canada a mené la charge à l'échelle mondiale pour instaurer le régime de sanctions le plus sévère qui n'a jamais été imposé à une grande économie et pour réduire la capacité du président Poutine à financer cette guerre illégale. I want to be clear, however, that our quarrel is not with the people of Russia or of Belarus. Many brave people in these countries are standing up to their dictators. And we see it here at home, too, with Russian Canadians supporting Ukraine and calling for an end to this unjust invasion. Vladimir Putin made a grave miscalculation when he launched his war of aggression. He underestimated Ukrainians, and he underestimated the solidarity of their friends around the world. He wanted to threaten and weaken NATO and democracies around the world, but today we are stronger and more unified than ever. Aux Nations Unies, une majorité écrasante de pays ont maintes fois voté pour condamner la guerre et réclamer qu'elle prenne fin. Encore une fois, ils l'ont fait encore une fois hier. Et la Cour pénale internationale poursuit son enquête sur les crimes de guerre commis par la Russie en Ukraine. Together with our friends and allies, we are holding Putin and his henchmen to account. And we are delivering critical and significant support to Ukraine. Momentum is on Ukraine's side. They have launched astonishing counteroffensives, reclaimed territory, and forced Russian troop withdrawals. To date, Canada has provided more than $5 billion in support to Ukraine and its people. And we're the only country to issue Ukraine sovereignty bonds, which Canadians purchased to support the government of Ukraine directly. The impacts of these are being felt on the ground by soldiers and by citizens. We've provided military training for more than 35,000 members of Ukraine's security forces through Operation Unifier. We've delivered M777 howitzers that have helped Ukraine secure victories in key battles. We've committed over 200 Canadian-made armoured vehicles that are helping soldiers defend the border in northern Ukraine. Nous avons acheté un système national de missiles surface-air perfectionné pour renforcer la défense ukrainienne contre les raids aériens russes. Nous avons fait don de 8 chars d'assaut en collaboration avec nos alliés pour aider l'Ukraine à gagner sur le champ de bataille. Nous avons imposé des sanctions à plus de 2400 personnes et entités, et notamment pris les devants pour imposer des sanctions à la Banque centrale russe. Our support is also helping provide stability in Ukraine in the face of war, so that schools and hospitals can stay open, so that the heat and lights will stay on through the winter, and so that the government of Ukraine can continue supporting its people. Le Canada est solidaire de l'Ukraine depuis le début de ce conflit, quand la Russie a annexé illégalement la Crimée et déclenché un conflit dans l'est de l'Ukraine. Et nous allons rester solidaires de l'Ukraine. Ce matin, mes homologues du G7 et moi avons discuté directement avec le président Zelenskyy. Nous avons réaffirmé que notre soutien à l'Ukraine restera inébranlable aussi longtemps qu'il le faudra. Nous avons appelé la Russie à retirer immédiatement, complètement et sans condition ses forces militaires du territoire ukrainien à l'intérieur des frontières internationalement reconnues du pays. Putin is dangerous, he is cowardly, and he is weak. His brazen disregard for human life, his irresponsible rhetoric, and his willingness to inflict terrible violence on innocent people may seem to have no limits. But what is truly without limits is the courage and resolve of those who fight every day for their freedom. The everyday Ukrainian citizens who joined the armed forces, the children who had to be brave and say goodbye to a parent or grandparent so they could be safer here in Canada, the soldiers, nurses, doctors, mayors, postal workers, and so many more who've stayed in Ukraine and continue to serve the place that they call home and preserve the Ukraine that they are fighting for. The journalists on the front lines who tell the stories of this war so that Russian-abetted disinformation and misinformation is called to account. And of course, the people here at home and around the world who donate what they can and fly the blue and yellow flag in solidarity. This solidarity is on full display in every corner of Canada. Canadians are standing with Ukrainians, while Ukrainians are standing up for more than their own freedom. They're standing up for all of us. Slava Ukraini. Heroyam Slava.
Minister, merci le Premier ministre et la ministre Anand et aussi Mr. Baker. We have 20 minutes for questions from media. Nous avons 20 minutes pour les questions des médias, and we will begin with Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail. À vous la parole.
Hi, Prime Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. I wanted to ask on another topic regarding China. You said yesterday there were many inaccuracies in the leaks from CSIS. Can you explain exactly what is inaccurate in these leaked CSIS reports?
First of all, I think Canadians understand how important it is that we continue to do all the necessary work with our national security institutions to keep Canadians safe, to keep our institutions safe. And Canadians can be and should be confident that our institutions, particularly our electoral and democratic processes, have not been compromised, were not compromised in the 2019 or 2021 elections. We created mechanisms for both before the 2019 elections, a panel, a task force, to ensure that the outcome of these elections were decided by Canadians and Canadians alone. And that's exactly what happened. At the same time, we've been very clear throughout that foreign governments like China, Russia, and others are attempting to destabilize our democracies and, yes, interfere with our electoral processes. We need to remain vigilant. We need to be continuing to support our national security agencies and officials to protect and continue to protect the legitimacy and the integrity of our elections. That's also why we continue to support and encourage the work being happening at various committees, the various investigations and follow-ups, and the level to which this is being taken seriously by all Canadians, because it is a very serious subject. I will highlight, for example, around inaccuracies, that when the National Security and Intelligence Advisor appeared at committee a number of weeks or months ago, she highlighted inaccuracies that were contained in some of these media leaks. But we will continue to respect the importance of national security laws and rules.
Follow-up?
Okay. Ce qui est le plus important dans tout ça, c'est de comprendre que les Canadiens sachent et puissent être confiants que l'intégrité de nos élections en 2019, en 2021, n'ont pas été compromises. Que oui, malgré le fait, et on en parle depuis longtemps, que la Chine, la Russie et d'autres pays essayent d'interférer dans nos démocraties, essayent de déstabiliser notre société, essayent de compromettre nos processus électoraux, ils n'ont pas réussi. Et on a des experts en sécurité nationale, on a des hauts fonctionnaires qui ont été mis en position d'évaluer l'impact de cette interférence, des mesures que nous avons prises en tant que gouvernement depuis 2019 parce qu'on prenait cet enjeu extrêmement au sérieux. Les Canadiens peuvent avoir confiance dans l'intégrité de nos élections. Mais comme on dit depuis 2019 et bien avant, et comme on continue de répéter, oui, la Chine et d'autres pays essayent d'interférer dans nos démocraties. C'est pour ça que nous allons continuer de travailler avec nos agences de sécurité et de renseignement. Nous allons encourager le travail qui se fait en comité parlementaire et par différents experts pour continuer de se doter d'encore plus d'outils pour assurer la protection de nos démocraties. Par rapport à des erreurs, bien, on a vu quand la conseillère en sécurité et intelligence nationale a paru en comité parlementaire, elle a souligné des éléments non factuels dans les documents qui ont été partagés avec les médias il y a plusieurs mois.
Thank you. I think we're talking about more recent reports, though. So will you declassify the reports so that the public can see them for themselves? And will you establish a public inquiry into Chinese interference in the past two elections as called for by the former electoral officer, Jean-Pierre Kingsley?
I think it is a very good thing that Canadians are understanding how serious it is that China and other countries are continuing to try to destabilize and influence our democracies and our institutions. That's why we have continually given new resources and new tools, including a panel and a task force that we set up way back in 2019 to ensure that our election integrity held, that our national security experts are able to do the work that Canadians expect them to do. We welcome the work that committees are doing. We'll continue to work to give all the tools necessary to our national security agencies so that Canadians can continue to be confident that we are taking this as seriously as it must be. And I say again, we are taking this extremely seriously and always have.
Thank you. Next question.
Afternoon, Prime Minister. Candy Shan with CTV National News. I'd like to ask you about the Canada-Ukraine Authorization for Emergency Travel Program, which has provided Ukrainians with visas the most crucial necessities while they are seeking shelter and health care. So that federal program is scheduled to end next month. Will that be replaced or extended?
Canadians continue to demonstrate every day their solidarity with Ukraine and with Ukrainians. What I saw this morning sitting down with young people who'd come from Ukraine over the past year and years, whether I see the generosity that's happening, whether it's here or Winnipeg or anywhere across the country, of Canadians giving to support people who are fleeing this violence and fearing for their loved ones' lives, the generosity of Canadians, the desire of people across this country to continue to help knows no bounds. A year in, we're all of somewhat mixed feelings. Knowing that Putin was expecting this war to be over in a matter of days or weeks, knowing that he was unable to, despite overwhelming military numbers and advantages and resources, should be a point of deep gratitude and respect to Ukrainians who've stood up to defend the values that underpin all of our democracies, but also is every day an ongoing tragedy for the people of Ukraine who are suffering bombings and hardships and difficulties because of Putin's illegal invasion. So Canada, at its simplest, most simple expression, will continue to stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And in regards to the special travel authorizations, we are looking at right now how the best way for us to continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and we will be talking about that in the coming weeks to make sure that everyone knows that Canada will continue to do what is best positioned to continue to help the people of Ukraine.
Follow-up. There are still over 30,000 more applications waiting to be processed. So what's going to happen to those Ukrainians while we are still figuring it out, while the program expired?
We are continuing to process applications. We are continuing to respond to the deep desire by Canadians, by communities, by families across this country to do more for the people of Ukraine, and we will.
Thank you. Next question.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Matthew Bingley with Global News. What do you make of Russia's disinformation campaigns trying to weaken support for Ukraine both here and in the West?
There's absolutely no surprise that Russia is spreading lies around the world because the truth is so damning to them. They chose to violate the UN Charter and international law. They chose to violate the foundational principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty in an act of cowardly greed and conquest that has proven to be a terrible, terrible error in judgment on Putin's part. Both because he deeply underestimated the strength, the courage, the valor of Ukrainians and their desire to defend their language, their culture, their land, but also because he underestimated the fact that the world would not stand by while he violated the sovereignty, the integrity, and the principles of self-determination of a peaceful democracy. So we will continue to stand for the truth. We will continue to answer his lies and misinformation with truth, and continue to make sure that people all around the world understand what a terrible, terrible act this was by Vladimir Putin in choosing to launch a war by invading Ukraine even further.
What more, though, could Canada be doing to effectively counter these disinformation campaigns?
Obviously, Canada continues to work with partners around the world on spreading information to the Russian people, who we increasingly see are reeling from the human costs and the economic costs of Putin's illegal war on Russians themselves. We will continue to support brave journalists who are telling the truth, who are sharing actual news and facts around the world. We will continue to ensure that there is no place for the lies that Putin is sharing. And we will continue to impress upon Canadians how important it is to be thoughtful and critical as they engage online and are faced with tremendous amounts of misinformation.
Prochaine question.
Yannick Lepage, Radio-Canada. Sur l'Ukraine, craignez-vous que la Chine s'implique militairement aux côtés de la Russie dans la guerre?
C'est certain qu'on aimerait bien que la Chine soit plus forte sur la défense des principes de souveraineté. C'est toujours un principe que la Chine a souligné d'importance à l'échiquier mondial dans les discussions diplomatiques à l'international, l'importance de respecter la souveraineté de chaque pays. Or, quand il est question de respect et de défense de la souveraineté de l'Ukraine, la Chine manque de conviction et de fermeté dans tout ce qu'ils ont à dire là-dessus. Mais en tant que G7, en tant que partenaire à travers le monde, nous avons été très, très clairs que d'aider ou d'endosser la Russie dans cette attaque illégale et irresponsable contre l'Ukraine serait une très mauvaise idée. Et nous allons continuer de souligner ça avec nos partenaires chinois.
Et au sujet de l'ingérence chinoise, est-ce que vous croyez que c'est suffisamment préoccupant pour nécessiter une enquête publique?
Je pense que c'est une bonne chose que les Canadiens sont très conscients de ce qu'on dit depuis plusieurs années, que la Chine essaie de s'ingérer dans nos processus démocratiques au Canada. C'est pour ça d'ailleurs qu'il y a bien des années, en début 2019, on a créé un panel de hauts fonctionnaires pour gérer, pour suivre et intervenir si nécessaire dans nos processus électoraux pour contrer de l'ingérence, mais aussi on a donné plus d'outils à nos agences de sécurité et de renseignement pour s'assurer de l'intégrité de nos élections. Et j'accueille avec grande ouverture le travail que font différents comités de parlementaires pour faire des suivis sur cet enjeu. Et nous allons continuer d'en discuter et de répondre concrètement avec des outils sur ce qu'on sait, ce qui s'est passé en 2019-2021 et qu'on va devoir continuer à lutter contre dans les années à venir aussi.
Hi, Megan McLeister, CBC News. Prime Minister, what do you make of the 3 Conservative MPs, including a member of Shadow Cabinet, who met with a member of the far-right German AfD party?
I think the Conservative Party of Canada owes some explanations to Canadians. We've seen consistently a pattern from Conservative politicians, whether it's attaching a misogynistic YouTube tag to reach out to anti-women groups online through YouTube videos. The answer is, oh, we didn't know about it. There's nothing to see here. A Conservative leader meets with a known far-right extremist. Oh, we didn't know who it was. Consistently, we see Conservative parliamentarians and people who should know better associating themselves with folks responsible for a particularly vile level of rhetoric and hatred. And their answer is all the same, oh, we didn't know. At one point, Canadians need to stop being treated like fools, and the Conservatives need to own up and either really dissociate themselves from hateful, vile, intolerant rhetoric, or tell the truth and explain that they actually have room for those rhetorics and that intolerance within their party. Je pense que le Parti conservateur a besoin d'offrir des explications sincères aux citoyens. C'est un pattern qu'on voit régulièrement. Des conservateurs qui rencontrent, qui encouragent des propos, des individus qui avancent des propos intolérants, vicieux, remplis de haine, pour ensuite dire « Ah, on ne le savait pas ». Ben voyons. À un moment donné, ils vont devoir choisir, ou bien ils vont condamner sans équivoque ces propos haineux, irresponsables et les gens qui les portent, ou bien ils vont avouer que non, il y a de la place pour ces vues-là à l'intérieur du Parti conservateur du Canada. Ils ne peuvent pas jouer des deux bords constamment. À un moment donné, ça va faire.
And the border, what would be the benefit for Canada of keeping the safe third country agreement?
Canada is a signatory to international conventions, and as our values as an open and welcoming country that understands the need to support refugees in the world, to examine the claims of anyone who arrives in this country claiming refugee status. If we didn't, well, the Safe Third Country Agreement simply says that if someone arrives in Canada after having passed through a country that is considered by the United Nations to be a safe country, a country of asylum, well, the rule is, the principle is, people should have claimed asylum in that first safe country they got to. So people traveling to Canada to claim asylum would have needed first to actually claim asylum in the United States. That's what the Safe Third Country does. And it means that anyone who shows up at a border crossing along the Canada-US border who says, I want to claim refugee status to the Canadian officials at the border, gets told, well, actually, you just came from the United States, so you have to claim refugee status in the United States. That's what the Safe Third Country Agreement does. The exception, the loophole that has been found is that if people cross into Canada via Roxham Road or elsewhere and then claim refugee status, we cannot send them back to the United States because they're already in Canada. So the problem isn't with the Safe Third Party Agreement. The problem, Safe Third Country Agreement, the problem is with the fact that we cannot apply it across the entirety of our border between official border crossings as well. And that's what we're working on with the United States to try and fix, so that the principles of the Safe Third Country, which is you claim asylum in the first safe country you get to, continues to hold.
Mr. Prime Minister, the UK is starting to train the Ukrainian Air Force on how to fly high-level aircraft. Poland could start soon. Given that there is a NATO flight training center in Canada, is Canada willing to bring Ukrainian pilots to train them how to fly jets and other high-level aircraft?
Canada is always looking for ways as to how we can best help in Ukraine. And we do that in many, many different ways. But since 2015, we have been on the ground in Ukraine, training up close to 35,000 members of the Ukrainian Defense Force, which has been extraordinarily impactful during these past 12 months of this war, this illegal war. We will always look on how to support and train where it makes sense for us to do. We're right now training up Ukrainian tank crews on operating Leopard-2s that we are sending. So we're always open to doing more, but we will work with our allies, and we will especially work with the Ukrainians to be there to help with how we can best help.
My next question is on a different topic. There are widespread calls for a new national security policy, which has not been updated in almost 2 decades. My question is, will Canada devise a new policy?
There is no one national security policy in Canada. There are multiple areas of responsibility, multiple layers, multiple processes whereby we defend our national security on many, many different fronts. And I can assure you that we are constantly investing in, upgrading, improving the tools that we have as Canadians and as institutions to continue to keep Canadians safe. Protecting Canadians' safety and security is always going to be job one of any government, and we always engage in doing whatever we need to keep Canadians safe.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Ben Mussett from the Toronto Star. Regarding the report from the breach, what's your response to charges that one of your ministers undermined the independence of the PMPRB by asking them to stop consultations?
So you're talking about the breach?
The breach media outlet in BC, they reported yesterday, I think it was, that Duclos asked the PMPRB to stop consultations after being lobbied by the pharmaceutical industry. What's your response to that?
First of all, we know how important it is to both continue to support research into pharmaceuticals, into life-saving drugs that will help not just in Canada but around the world, and at the same time ensure that Canadians are paying the lowest possible prices for life-saving medicines. These are two principles that we work very, very hard on, and we continue to see prices go down and investments in the pharmaceutical industry in Canada go up. There's always more work to do, and we will always make sure that we're doing that the right way.
Last question, dernière question.
But do you think that that was improper of him to intervene like that? And how do you think this might impact your deal with the NDP, and how might you convince them that you're still interested in expanding pharmacare?
We remain committed to ensuring that we're lowering drug prices for Canadians. In this country, nobody should have to choose between buying groceries or getting needed medication. And the fact that that is continuing to happen is something we continue to fight against, continue to work against. We have brought down drug prices significantly by the creation of a national drug agency, by moving forward on high-cost drugs for rare diseases approach that is supporting provinces on those elements, and we're continuing to move forward on that, and we're happy to work with the NDP on that. If I might, there's another issue that I just wanted to make mention of that is bothering me. It really surprises me that Google has decided that they'd rather prevent Canadians from accessing news than actually paying journalists for the work they do. I think that's a terrible mistake, and I know Canadians expect journalists to be well paid for the work they do. Je pense que c'est extrêmement surprenant que Google préfère empêcher les Canadiens d'accéder aux nouvelles plutôt que de vouloir payer justement les journalistes pour le travail qu'ils font en tant que professionnels. C'est vraiment désolant. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you. That will conclude today's press conference. Merci. Ça va mettre fin à la conférence presse.